Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Included series. My name is Dana Wilson, and I'm the CEO and founder of CHIP, which stands for Changing How Individuals Prosper. CHIP is a digital platform connecting individuals like you to Black and Latinx financial professionals. This series was started to give people of color a chance to tell our own stories and thoughts around wealth. We hope to demystify stereotypes that still plague many of our communities, regardless of economic status. So sit back, relax, and let's talk money.
Hello, everyone, and I hope everybody's staying safe. Thank you for always tuning in to the Included series. We greatly appreciate it. I know there is always a lot going on, but I hope you're at least able to take some of the positive moments and the positive waves that are coming out of 2020. So I hope you're having a great evening. Thanks for tuning in to tonight's episode. We're on episode 14, and I am extremely excited to bring in Orion Brown, who is the CEO and founder of the Black Travel Box. So let's pull in Orion. Hey, Orion.
Hi, thanks for having me.
No, thanks for coming on. I know it's like the world has turned upside down since we last connected and saw each other in person when we used to go to conferences live, right?
It's a completely different world.
I know. I can't even believe, what was that? Almost about 2 years ago, was it? At the...
At Black Women Talk Tech?
Yeah, Black Women Talk Tech.
Yeah, I don't think it was this past year. I did go this year as well, but yeah, it's been a minute. Yeah.
Oh.
Like it doesn't even feel like it's like has 2020 even been a year? Is this a year?
I know. This feels like almost 10 years. I feel like
we're real. Yes.
I have definitely noticed some like an influx of gray. So I don't know if that's just like the rapidness of 2020, but it's like, what is going on?
It's accelerating. But you know what, though? I think this has been such a challenging year, but it's also an opportunity for all of us to learn and grow and use this as a stepping stone as opposed to, the last nail in the coffin, I would say. So I think I'm hopeful. I am hopeful coming out of this year.
Yeah, likewise. I'm really spending the last couple months and really just trying to be as optimistic as possible. I think we have to pull out as much positive as we can that's going on. There's a lot to unpack in this year, but I think if we're able to pull out all the positivity that at least is happening, or the conversations and the actions that are going around, I think we'll at least be in somewhat of a better place. So I agree with that point. So how have you been just managing with everything that's going on, just from a self-care perspective? How are you really kind of taking care of yourself and dealing with things?
I mean, it's been a learning process throughout. And as much as COVID has been a challenge, as much as the resurgence of interest and activity around Black Lives Matter and around our political situations right now, regular life is still a thing, right? And, I've had deaths in the family. I've had all kinds of stuff going on over the last year. And I think the thing that I've really learned is to give myself grace in whatever form that I needed at the time. So if the grace is a nap, then I'm taking the nap. If grace is ducking out of a meeting, then we just need to reschedule that. If the grace is sitting in the sun in the middle of the day and just like getting fresh air for a moment, then that's what I do. And I have to still remind myself to do it because I'm a fairly driven person. And I think a lot of, type A folks who are like out there trying to like go build something for themselves and for their families and for their legacy, you have that guilt thing on your shoulder that says like, you can't stop right now. You're so close. You need to just finish it. You need to keep working. But there's always going to be something to work on. And so ultimately, you really do have to just say, this is just as important. Just to take that time. This is the work that has to be done so that I can bring at least, I don't know if I'm at 100%, but I can bring that good 80, 90%. I mean, let's be honest. And that's also too, to be like, it's okay to not be 100% in a world where we're seeing Black men beaten on the streets daily. Like, it's okay to not be 100% in that.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is okay. And I like the point about giving ourselves grace, because I am a lot like you too. Like, we have to be reminded to take those steps back, to take those naps, to take those breaks. Yeah, and it's tough. It's like you have that guilt, especially as Black women. We feel like we're always supposed to be on, always supposed to be everywhere and doing everything. Especially, I'm sure we share this as founders and CEOs of companies. It's like when you're building, you're always building.
Yes,
and I think it's
it does not stop.
Yeah, it just doesn't stop, right?
Yeah.
And I almost think it's worse now that it's home. It's like you can kind of wake up to all of your stuff and your computers, your things that are going off, and you don't really have that step away in the morning. Like for myself, I had that commuting time where I would read or I would listen to podcasts, and it's like I'm trying to get that back, right, and make sure.
And it's hard to make those boundaries.
It is.
Create those boundaries, but it's really hard to do because it's like I'm at home, but I'm at work. Am I relaxing at work or am I working at home? I'm not sure.
That's a good. I like that. That's a really good point. It's like, what am I really doing with my time, and is it being used effectively?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I am all about the naps. It's like you have to at least take care of your body and make sure that part is at 100, even if you can't show up at 100. And right now, I think it's tough for a lot of us to show up and be all the way there with, everything that's going on, right? So let's talk a little bit about, the wealth of everything and how, you're building wealth within your company, you're building wealth for your family. But when did you first really fall in love with money and really understand the power that it had within your life?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I would say, when I came out of college, I was really blessed and I had a great job coming out of college. And being a kid from the South Side of Chicago, I was used to, and would still happen, and hell, sometimes still happens. You go in a store and people follow you around. Can I help you? All this stuff. It's like you don't even have stuff that's worth following me around for. Like, what's this one? And I think it was having cash in hand and being able to, because I had been traumatized at an early age. I remember going into the Mall of America in Bloomington, Minnesota when I was like 12 after church. I was dressed like a total church nerd. I mean, I had socks and sandals on. I don't know how
socks and sandals.
I thought I had any kind of intention other than to just window shop. And I came in, I used to always go to Claire's Boutique. Like that was the thing when you were in Claire's Boutique. And I always kept the shades on my head because I can't have see with shades on. So I walk on them, they're cute. There, I had my rainbow shades. I walked in, I looked around, and then I was about to leave, and the woman stopped me and was like, "You stole those. I'm going to have you removed." And she made this whole thing. She detained me. She had like security come. And ever since then, I've always had this thing, like, I don't like going into stores without having money on me. And I think when I came out of college and I really was in a position to be like, this is my credit card. These are my debit cards. This is the cash. And you see all of this, I'm not spending any of it with you. I mean, it's a bit petty, but it also was a power and it also was a shield. And it was a way for me to feel like I had space in a world that hadn't made space for me. And I think I discovered that really early on and, managing my credit and doing things like that so that I could have better cards and better, coverages and all of those things helped me to really feel secure socially around my financial position.
I think that's really interesting too. It's like when we're thinking about, especially as people of color, as women, as Black women, and we're talking about that trauma that sometimes that we go through as kids, right? Where people are looking at us. And I've had that happen to me when I was younger and I would walk in these stores and, we're teenagers and people are following us around. And it's just like, at the time when you're young, you somewhat understand, but when you really look back at it as an adult and you understand that how that trauma just kind of follows you, right? And especially when it comes to money. And for you, it's like, now I feel like I have to have all of these things on me. I have to continue to have better just to prove, not just to myself, but just to other people, right? Like, I'm good here. I'm supposed to be here. I belong, right? We're always trying to find those spaces where there aren't any.
Yeah, I will say shamelessly that I will pull out the platinum card and be like,
I'm good.
Is there something I can do for you? And it isn't proof necessarily to myself. It really, but you hit the nail on the head with the trauma of it. I can't go into a store without thinking about that moment and that feeling and without revisiting it, which is, we'll have to talk to my therapist about that. But, but that's like, it's a thing. It's a real thing. And it's unfortunate that we have to use externalities to show our value within the culture that we're in right now. But, having your financial ish together is a great way to position yourself socially to not, well, I won't even say not deal with those things because those things still happen. Oprah still wasn't allowed in stores and all kinds of crazy stuff. But to be able to say, I have a means to deal with this. I have a means to work around this and potentially show someone exactly what they're getting into.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just that, right? Like sometimes you have to just drop that platinum card on them just so that they can look at you or stop looking at you in a particular way, right? We feel like we're always, that judgment comes on, and, oh, this person is not going to be able to pay for this. Oh, this person's card is going to get declined. And it's like, no, like I have the same stuff in my wallet, right? If not better. So,
I mean, sometimes there is the clapback and they're like, well, I'm going to need to see some ID. And you're like, seriously? But that's the wrestling. And at the end of the day, I've left stuff at the counter and been like, all of this? Yeah, it's not worth it. I'll go buy it across there for twice the amount and get better customer service. Bye. The petty does come out. The petty does come
and I mean, sometimes it does, right? Like sometimes there's a lesson to be learned. It's not necessarily our lesson, it's theirs, right? Like you know,
like that ain't about you. Right. Bye.
Right. It's like you need to learn how to treat people, and especially that judgment factor that we're just dealing with, right? And even to kind of go off topic a little bit, but kind of in the same notion around trauma, just with everything that's going on. It's like I always feel like I need to leave the house with my phone. Which is crazy, which, before I would never really think about, but now I'm kind of hypersensitive to the fact that I need to have something on me just in case. Like, and it's sad that I'm thinking about that way. Like, you're not running out the house, going to walk the dog and just kind of do stuff and maneuver within your life. It's like we think about the things that we now have to do to protect ourselves or feel, somewhat protected. So
that, and the interesting thing is arguably there was a point when cell phones became, big or whatnot. You didn't want to leave your house without your cell phone, not just so you could contact people. So I'm not talking about when you're like on Twitter all day.
Right.
You did have that thought of, what if there's an emergency and I need to call for help?
Mm-hmm.
Now it's like, what if the help tries to give me? I need to record the help. And so that's an unfortunate reality right now, which is, it's a little heartbreaking, but, this is the process. This is the growth that our country has to go through and that the world has to go through.
Yeah, absolutely. This is the growth, and this is the place for us to really tell our stories and, be able to kind of give that back when we're talking about our communities, when we're talking about wealth building. So what was it like when you were growing up in the household around money? Did you have conversations around that, or was it something that was a topic of conversation?
So I grew up in a single parent household. My mom, I made more my first year out of college than my mom ever made in a year of working. And so money was an open topic, but it was always a topic of something that was, lacking in some regard, right? There was always more months than there was money. And, whether it be Section 8 housing or food stamps, or, all of the different ways that one tries to navigate that, having a young child, not having help. I got exposure pretty early to budgeting. I would say, like, my mom could flip a $20 bill in the grocery store like nobody's business. You know what I mean? And so I was actually telling somebody a story the other day. I used to work for Kraft Foods, and we were working on creating new products for the value customer, which is like the customer that's shopping at the dollar store and Dollar General and things. And they gave us an exercise. And, I'm in a room full of people who make six figures, right? Making products for people who barely clear, $20K a year, $25K a year, if that, right? And so they had this project where everyone was given a budget. I think it was like $15 or $20, and they were tasked with getting food for the week. And when I tell you, so many people tapped out. And I came in and I was like, I took my photos and everything, and I was like, so we had some ham hocks and beans the first night, right? And then, and
they were like, what?
I was like, I had change left over. What's wrong with you people? What are you doing? You don't understand those packs of Kool-Aid, 3 for $5. Shoot, y'all don't know. And so, I learned very early on the value of budgeting and getting the most value out of the dollar and looking at it like, what is going to be the most impactful use of each dollar that's in my hands. And then from there, as I became more educated and I got older, I used to do my mom's taxes, like, so I got used to this kind of, working the financials and understanding the importance of credit and understanding the importance of tax write-offs and things like that. I mean, there's not that many that you can get, but when you get an earned income credit, get that money.
Right.
So yeah, it wasn't like, I wasn't the kid that had like a savings account that, in a weekly allowance, but I was very much involved with the household finances. And I think it was a really good start because I paid off all of my college loans and my graduate school loans, ahead. I'm debt free in that regard. And I think it came from understanding that, like, just live below your means, have a solid budget, and trick yourself if you have to. Like, treat yourself, but also trick yourself. Like, give yourself treats every now and again, because that can be a release, and there's something oppressive and traumatic about, living in poverty and living under, a certain level of means. But also find ways to trick yourself, to hide money away, to pay yourself first in ways that you just get behaviorally used to. Managing your money in a certain way that there's always something being saved.
Yeah. And those are all really good points. It's like we often are really kind of trying to figure out. It's like, when we're kids and we're going through certain scenarios. And I think that's an amazing exercise to go through, especially for people who are making, that level of income and really having to relate to someone who's making probably below minimum wage or, whatever that low income is. And it's like they can't even really process their mind around how they would spend $20 and break that down into something that's livable, right? But there's a lot of which is crazy, right? And it's like we think about it, and there's so many people that are living that way, living paycheck to paycheck, really trying to figure things out, but that upper, echelon or level of individuals can't really relate, especially those that never came from that starting point, or really had to kind of decipher or watch their parent decipher and make those moves with that money, right? And just make it flex.
Yeah. I mean, well, I think it's a very different world when you can complain about how expensive Whole Foods is.
Yes.
It's just a different world, right? So you don't even know what the normal price for a loaf of bread or what a gallon of milk would be. You just know that, like, suddenly you just spent $200 and you were expecting to go in and get 5 things, right? And while that is still a valid challenge, right? And it's definitely a wake-up call to pay attention to what you're spending, it's a very different situation than being like, I know this $20 is all I have for the next 3 weeks. How am I going to feed my kids? How am I going to make sure that they go to school on a full stomach? And then how do I put gas in the car, or those types of things? So, it's great for people to do those exercises, but ultimately they have to take them seriously. I think there were a couple people who were like, oh, well, I just bought a pizza and we just ate pizza all week. And it was like,
right. Who ate pizza? And pizza, you can't recycle that over, a certain amount of days. So it's like, you're not really thinking of the longevity of what you ordered. It's like
butter and jelly. I mean, yeah, you can do that, but you need to have something that's not going to have you passing out in the middle of the day. And so the nutritional aspects as well, where people just really don't think about it. And yeah, I mean, it was an interesting exercise, and that was the one time in my life that I was proud of growing up poor. Y'all don't know how to make a 20.
Right. Like, God forbid something happens to you, like you won't know how to survive.
Oh my gosh. I mean, even with all the stuff that's going on right now, I mean, I have a firm faith, but also I know that I've seen challenging times. So I'm not really afraid of, being out of work, or really afraid of, some calamity happening with my business or anything like that, because I'm like, I know how to survive in that environment. And I think that is valuable. And I think it's something that everybody should be taught. I mean, those are life skills that can help you in a number of places. And it's not just about being impoverished and trying to figure things out. It's about creative problem solving in a dynamic world.
Yeah. I couldn't have said it better. I think it's and you're right. It's like, it's about creating that skill set that a lot of people are missing out on, right? It's like they teach us everything else under the sun in school, except for how to really maintain and take care of ourselves as humans, right? And it's like the things that we need to do that are really going to be super beneficial.
We don't need calculus. I mean, but we don't need it. It's not a necessity.
It's not.
Textbook is a necessity.
Right. Yeah.
Balancing your bank book, balancing your ledger, understanding what your budget is, what's your net worth. A lot of people under a certain income level don't even think about their net worth as a number.
Yep.
It's like, know what your net worth is. That's important.
Or even really hard how to articulate it, or even just kind of the thought of a lot of these terms just make people shy away. And it's like, I don't want to talk about it because I can't even figure out how to live this week, like literally live. And then you want me to talk about my net worth. But at the same time, it's like, you have to be able to talk about these things, and people should be introducing these topics to you so that you can get to the point, or even just put it in your brain so you can kind of work on whatever you need to work on. So like you're talking about it being a learned, kind of like a learned skill, like it was something that you took and then you continue to get better at. And once you became an adult and stepped out of college and were, was making a really good salary, you were able to just kind of just go and just do stuff. Like it was, like you were on autopilot basically.
Yeah. I mean, and it's so, like autopilot is a good way to put it. And it's also understanding, again, like I mentioned, how to trick yourself. So one of the first things that I did was I was actually working at a bank at the time. So I could, get those free accounts when you can, get the student account, anything that's gratified, there's a discount. So you're not paying fees for housing.
I thank God for that being my first job out of college.
Yeah. And so I opened 2 checking accounts. And so one was the account that all of my, paycheck and everything went into, and my necessities and bills came out of, my rent, my electricity, all of that stuff. Anything that fluctuated a lot, I didn't put it on auto pay, but everything else I did. And then I had that second checking account, and that's where I paid myself. And so pay the bills first, and then I would allocate money over to it, and I could burn up that little debit card as much as I wanted to. And when it was out, it was out. It's like going to Dave and Buster's, and you have like the coins on your card. Your parents give you those coins, and you're like, all right, I don't know how many points this is, but I'm about to light up this whole place. And so that was a great way for me to do that. Because then when I hit the bottom of that, I'm like, okay, so clearly we've hit our budget for the month. Do I really need this next thing? And then I get really mindful about that. And sometimes I dipped in more, but it was a great way to give me also freedom and not feel like I'm working this job all day and I don't have anything to show for it because I'm squirreling away all of my money. Because that's also, I think, a sort of a depressing thought. Again, especially when you see your peers who maybe don't look like you and they don't have a care in the world because they have backing. They've got folks that they can move back in with. They've got, I can borrow, all of that. So they're enjoying the fullness of their salaries, and you're like trying to keep up. And, people say, well, don't try to keep up with the Joneses. Yeah, but that's not realistic. If you have any kind of social life and you're in your 20s, you're going to want to do the same things that your friends are doing. Maybe it's not even a competitive thing. Maybe it's just I would like to do that too. This is the life that I would like to have. And so finding ways to, match your 401k like you're in your 50s, not like you're in your 20s, right? And do all of those things and max it out while you can, and then give yourself a space for freedom. So maybe I'm not going out every weekend, but those couple weekends I'm going out, I'm splurging. I'm condensing into those weekends. And that kind of creates that balance.
Yeah. And it's like, you don't have to have that guilt, right? So it's like and I did the same thing as far as like separating out my accounts, because I realized when I first started working, I was eating out a lot, right? And I was just like, what am I doing? I'm looking at my receipts and I'm looking at all this money I'm spending on food. And
that isn't even that good, right? Like who's not even that?
It's not. The thing that was closest where my bank was like Qdoba and a couple other places that were in Chapel Hill, North Carolina, where I first started working at the bank. But it's like the food's not even that good, and you're spending all this money. So it's just like you get to that point,
and you're like, I didn't finish that sandwich. Why?
Seriously. And you get to the point of frustration, and I just like turned it off, was cooking everything, and just kind of put myself on autopilot from there, and also separating the account. So that's really great advice and a good thing to do, because then you can really go out and you can spend without regret and without guilt, and waking up that next month, that Monday morning and saying, man, I spent all this money and now I still have to pay X, Y, and Z, right? It's a different feeling of waking up and like, wow, I had a really great weekend. Everything's paid. I don't need to worry about anything. And maybe I even have some money left over to do whatever else I want to do, right? Or travel or do all those things. Because you're right. When you're in your 20s, you want to have fun. Even in your 30s and 40s, you want to be able to enjoy life with your friends. And, sometimes if you're not budgeting appropriately, you're not able to do that.
Discipline is freedom.
You're right.
Discipline is freedom. It feels like discipline, which it is, but it creates so much freedom.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that's like the perfect saying. It needs to be on a t-shirt. Now, how do you feel like a lot of these skills really transferred over to you building out your business? And when you kind of transitioned into building out the Black Travel Box, what was that like as a founder in that journey?
Yeah, I mean, there were some things I did have to let go. Well, I didn't have to. I decided to let go in terms of, I think culturally, you know, for instance, when I went to business school, I quit a perfectly good job. I'll put that in quotes. I quit a perfectly good job to go to school. And so what you'll hear maybe from your neighborhood or from your friends and family from that cultural perspective is why, you know, trade in a nice salary to go not work. And I had to get that invest in myself mentality, right? And they didn't understand what that arbitrage was of coming into school with, you know, X income and then coming out of school in market for X times 2.5 or X times 1.5 of that, because of the value and the investment that space gives you and the network that it gives you and the dividends that it'll pay off in the long run. And so coming into entrepreneurship, it was sort of a similar exercise of trying to shake off that that feeling of being very risk averse. Putting myself in a space of saying calculated risk, right? And calculate the risk and then decide on how much risk you're willing to take and then let go, right? Because, you know, just like I said with the second checking account, I was willing to risk $400 or whatever it might be every month to just, you know, not think about it, go to the grocery store and not think about it. And so once I did that, I couldn't be in the grocery store going, oh, well, maybe I should pinch my pennies here or there, because it defeats the purpose of that. And so, you know, a lot of people say, well, you know, you're so brave for starting your company and stepping out and doing that. And I'm like, what could go wrong? I could be embarrassed. Okay, I understand that. You know, I could lose my savings. I could, you know, fail the company. But I'm like, I know how to make money. I know how. I have transferable skills. I can get a job again. And even if I had to start from zero, I know how to budget. I know how to manage. And having been $250,000 in debt from school and all of that stuff at some point in life, so having a negative net worth to coming to a positive net worth, I'm okay with it dropping. I'm okay with it coming back down to zero. I am still young enough to build that back up. And so that transition for me was partially mindset transition of making sure that I gave myself comfort to take risks, because otherwise I wouldn't be able to push against the idea and what I want to go do with this company and what I want to build if I'm constantly afraid that I'm going to lose, right? And then the second part was also a practicality to it, right? So making sure that I had, you know, financial cushions in different places that I was able to set up for myself, deciding what money I would dip into and what money I would not, and then figuring out, or at least planning for, I don't know if I would say figuring out, but planning for the other places that I could potentially get funds outside of myself to help continue to move the business forward.
Yeah. It's like, it's such a journey and an evolution of how everything really just kind of comes together, and having to have those conversations with people who are just kind of used to or come from a different space. Right. I mean, my mother worked at the same company for 45 years. And when I initially left corporate the first time, it was just kind of like that stare of, you know, that look like,
you did a good job and you left it.
Right. Like, what are you doing? And that was in 2008, mind you, which was like the worst time. No one was I mean, that was the first crash.
Same. That was when I went to school, and they were like, what?
It was like, yeah. So, you know, we both did that thing. But it's like, you have to really do shift your mindset over. And I think you brought up a really great point when you're talking about sometimes fear, right? I think a lot of us as people of color, we have a fear of failure. in a lot of different ways. A fear of failure with your money, with your business, and all of those things would stop you from getting to that next level in your life. And really kind of recognizing that. Do you feel like you kind of went through that process? It seems like from what you're talking about, you kind of were able to initially get over that hump and just go try it, knowing that, worst case scenario, you could go back to whatever that would be.
I think the thing that's unique for any community of color or any community of folks who have come from lower or lower middle class families where there isn't a ton of infrastructure and isn't a ton of cushion for you, it's that feeling like your success is everyone else's success, right? But then your failure becomes everyone else's failure. And that's not necessarily true, right? You're not going to, they're not investing in you, right? They don't have the money to. So it's not like you're going to defraud them from their money. But you still have that feeling of like, if I fail, then I've taken away their opportunity to succeed. And, the loyalty and the intent there is good. But I think ultimately, in order for us to have sort of the same mindset as our competitors who are doing similar things in the marketplace, we have to start to turn some of those things off. Yes, we practical and we can do practical things to help risk mitigate, but you can't get in the arena without your boxing gloves, right? Like you can't come in not ready because you don't really want to fight. And so if you don't really want to fight, get that corporate job, do the first thing, and go like vacation or do whatever you want, which is a great thing. I'm not even saying that's a bad thing.
Yeah.
You really have to know what your risk tolerance is. And then you have to be okay with that because other people will be in your ear in either direction, telling you need to be less risk tolerant, more risk tolerant, and only you can answer that for yourself because you're the one that decided to step out from the umbrella. And I think that's fine. I mean, this is what it is to be an adult.
Yeah, seriously. It's like stepping out there all the time. And even in little steps, right? It's like from a child, we lose that ability to just go out and just test up, to jump off of things, to get on a bike and not even have a fear of falling, right? We just kind of just keep doing it and doing it over and over again. And I think to your point, it's like we kind of really have to embrace that back as an adult and really understanding what we're willing to take on and what we're willing to say, maybe that just doesn't work for me, or maybe it doesn't work for me right now, but still being able to lean into those points that will make us great and unique and not feeling like, we're letting down everyone, right? It's like if we don't succeed, we're letting down our community, we're letting down our family, right? We have to give ourselves, like you were saying earlier, grace.
Yes. Because it's a gamble. It's a gamble. And if your community bankrolled you and they put all their money on you, okay, I understand that. That's a different thing. But most of us feel like that's what's happened, but that's not really the case. And when people pour into us emotionally and from a support perspective, I think we should value that, but we shouldn't take those as shackles and chains into our situations that, require us to listen to them, to require us, because they haven't walked our path. So that's the other thing. I think we want to give reverence to folks that we believe reverence is due, but they're not always, the best at advising you in spaces that they've never walked in, and in a changing world. And so this is where I think the faith part comes in, and taking time to be honest with yourself and taking time to meditate and clear out all of those other things and go, what is my purpose in all of this? What is it that I'm here to actually accomplish and do? And is this thing that I'm taking a risk on pushing me closer to that or taking me away from it? That's really the only temperature gauge that I think makes sense, because everybody's going to have opinions. You're going to have guilt and you're going to have regrets and all of these different things. And the best way to kind of sweep all of that out of the way is to go, am I doing the next right thing given the information that I have? And am I making choices that I can go to bed at night and feel like I made the right choice, rather than trying to please the world around me?
Man, I feel like we have so much more to talk about, but we can almost end on that note. And I thought that was fantastic and really well said, right? We really have to lean into ourselves more and not lean into society so much and lean into all these other outside community factors. And I always think back, like I'm glad that we didn't have social media exist in the way that it did when we were growing up. And now we're kind of utilizing it in a different way from a business perspective, but that also trips you up as an adult when you're seeing all these people make moves and they're doing things with your business and feeling like, oh, I have to do this, I have to do that. And people are pulling you in different directions, but to really lean back into yourself and really understand or go back to your why, right? Like there's a why, a reason why you're either starting your business or you're trying to do something within your life, and really kind of figuring out your own purpose and your own journey. To your point. And what do you feel like? Well, I wanted you to tell everyone a little bit more about the Black Travel Box, and then also just kind of talk through how you feel like you're impacting the industry and reshaping the industry, and also your community from a wealth perspective and what you've created.
Yeah, so I came up with the idea of the Black Travel Box in 2017 and actually incorporated then. So when you talk about being like financially focused, I was like, this is just an idea, but I need to incorporate, or I need to create an LLC, because I am not trying to get my personal wealth all caught up in here in a way that, I wanted to have that coverage. So when you talk about like risk aversion, there are smart ways to build in safety nets so that, you could go bankrupt as a business and not go bankrupt as an individual. And so I mentioned that just because that was like the first thing I did. I named the company so I could set up the LLC.
I'm mad at you.
Right? So, my background is primarily in consumer packaged goods. And over the last 15 or so years that I've been working in corporate, I used to take, all the time that I had off, all my vacation time, and try to travel as much as I could as a form of self-care. And I just noticed that it was hard to find products that worked for me, for my hair and my skincare needs, and certainly not trying to travel around with them. And if you're going to different countries, you go to Japan, I don't even know how to explain to them what I need. Right? Like lotion? I don't know. Like ashy? I don't know.
Like, look.
And so when I came up with the idea, I just thought, like, there's an opportunity in the marketplace. This will be a fun passion project for me to work on. But as I started to build the idea out, and I'm still working full time, but as I started to build the idea out, I really realized there were some major gaps in the marketplace, particularly in the beauty industry, the travel industry that doesn't recognize people of color even travel, even though we spend $63 billion a year on travel. Like, can I just please see a Black person in an ad to go to Jamaica? That isn't the flight attendant. That's all I want. I just want one.
If I see that commercial one more time, and you know what commercial I'm talking about, because it's the same one they've been playing since I was like 2. But we will digress. We'll move on.
Right? And it's like, that's fine. You guys can be there too, but there's tons of us. And so that became more of a passion piece for me as I got into the process of structuring out sort of the financial underpinning for the business. I realized, the anecdotes of, women only getting 4% of VC funding, and then women of color getting like 0.01%, weren't just anecdotes. Like, this is what's happening, and it's translating into conversations that are crazy with people. You're sitting down with people, proving out numbers, and they're like, "But can you read?" What? Like, that's what it sounds like. That's what it sounds like to me. Like, and so as I went through that, I was like, this is really fundamentally broken from an investment standpoint, from the conversations that we're having. We're having really broken conversations in understanding that people of color are they're not disabled. They haven't been in car crashes. They don't have genetic dysfunctions. We're not disabled. We're completely capable and able as the next person. However, we have systems that are systematically maintaining, our disadvantage in being able to fund our business. I think that the statistic was it cost us about $250,000 more to get started in a business. Yeah. Because you talk about loans and all the access to capital just isn't there. The access to resources at affordable cost, all of that.
If we want to add in time, like
and I get paid for time. It costs me more, and I'm not getting paid for it, right? And so, to me, that's really fueled a fire in me. So, and I didn't even explain what Black Travel Box is, but we're a personal care product company for travelers of color. So I couldn't find products, so I thought, why not make them? And not only make products that are focused on inclusive ingredients, right? Inclusive formulations, not just stuff for normal hair, which, by the way, we still say normal on bottles, which is a problem for everybody.
Right.
But to also create things that actually travel well, get you through TSA, and meet those unique hair and skincare needs. And so when it comes to wellness, not wellness, wealth in the community, the conversations that I've found Black Travel Box to be a twofold vehicle. One, if I eat, we all gonna eat. So this is where I'm looking for partners and investors and folks that are a part of the community and friends of the community that I feel good about when this blows up, that their investment is going to come right back into the community. Secondarily to that, in sort of my scale plan for the business as we get larger and larger, the job creation platform that I'm going to build into that, I think is really important, because one of the catch-22s is in every industry, I feel like people say it's a pipeline problem. Like, I don't have enough qualified Black people, blah, 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 blah.
Don't get me started.
But it becomes a catch-22. One, we do know that there are qualified people, but the second issue is if you're just starting out, or if you haven't had the chance to get that first experience, then how do you get the second one? And so that's another piece that I'm building into sort of the business model. And I think the final piece is being really active in talking about the disparities and making them clear in these investment conversations. I just did something with Social Venture Circle a couple days ago where we talked about, impact investing and how it's not, philanthropically there's a thing, but there's this idea that people feel like they're just gambling their money away if they invest in Black and brown founders. And so they think of that as like charity, and that's their social impact. Oh, I gave you money. And it's like, no, boo, you had money.
Building a serious businesses. This is not just go out and, let me give you a little bit money so you can do that little thing or that little project that you're doing.
That little cute project, yeah. Yeah. It's like when you bring somebody home to your family and they're like, oh, your little friend. And you're like,
right, like, oh, they're cute.
Right. That's not what we're playing here. We're serious on here. So I think that's the third way in which I try to impact, our community's wealth, is to really be okay with having uncomfortable conversations with people about, this is how you come off when you say that. And this is why it doesn't work. And this is what we need to do to begin to fix that. So you may not give me money today, that's fine, but I want you to at least be educated and understand and see the error of it, and see that the lens with which you look at me, the implicit biases that you have, this isn't about you running around in hoods and burning crosses. This is not about that at all. This is about things that implicit attitudes that you have, that we all have in various ways and to various degrees, that impact our ability to see the quality of the talent that's in front of us. And so, insofar as I can talk my mouth off all day, I'm like, I'll use that, money have I none, but what I have, I will give to you. And it will be a whole mouthful of, this is why this is whack.
Yeah, and it really is. And it's just like, why, and it's just insanely frustrating that, we're in 2020, we're dealing with so much, and we're looking and really analyzing to the nth, 10th, 20th degree, all of these statistics and all of these numbers that are just not even a percent, right? Some of them aren't even close to a percent. It's like when we're looking at what, Black founders are getting, Black women are getting as founders, and we're still trying to figure out how to transfer that wealth. And I think a lot of what you're saying is so important, especially when we're talking about who we want to be our investors kind of on the ground floor. It's like when the company does well, I want to be able to look down and write checks to people that look like me. Like, that's what's going to change the narrative in our communities, is that we're also investing in our communities, investing in these Black owned businesses. And now we're reinvesting back into those communities, right? So we're able to sit down and feel good about writing these investor checks to people who can now, build that next set of wealth for themselves and their families.
Definitely. And I think it's not even just, it's not an exclusionary thing, because if you have investors on your cap table who really believe in Black founders, right? And they start making money on you, they're going to invest in more Black founders. And there's nothing wrong with stealing your money I mean, money is green. It doesn't,
no, absolutely.
Money don't see color. I do, but money does not. And so I think it's also important to diversify and to have a great diverse set of investors, but they do need to have that core belief or that core scrubbed down belief in people and their capabilities, rather than this lens of pattern matching and all these other things that we use to say, I don't believe that Black people are actually capable of doing this. I don't believe that brown people are actually capable of doing this. Like, that's what pattern matching is.
Yeah, that there's no real scale to the business. It's kind of like a nice to have thing and not really a solution based problem that's being solved. And of course, it's like that's not the case at all. And there's a lot of just education that we're having to do as Black founders to really just say, hey, this is important. This is a market. These are individuals that you really need to invest in. But it's like everyone's sitting around with all of this money and it's like, I don't have anywhere to put it. Oh, there's no, there's the pipeline problem, right? That has come up a lot, especially this week and last week with the remarks that the CEO from Wells Fargo made, right? And it's like, it's that tip of the tongue that people continue to use that excuse of, I don't know where to find people. And it's just like, no.
Well, here's the thing, and this is where the implicit bias comes in, because I'll hear investors say, well, it's hard to find good deal flow amongst minorities. And it's like, your due diligence to decide whether or not you have solid deal flow with these different opportunities is, as they would say themselves, more art than science. And the art comes in by your own lens, right? So, I hear crazy ideas that are like scribbled on napkins and getting that initial seed money, but we're asked to prove ourselves before we can get close to the cash. And I think it's a really interesting dichotomy. There was a study that was done, I can't remember who did it, but they were looking between men and women pitching, right? So race agnostic. And they basically said, when a man pitches, they're asked questions about how high can they build it? How big can it get? When a woman pitches, it's about how much you're going to mitigate your failure and mitigate your losses, and how are you going to mitigate your risk on all of these different ideas that you have. So they're not even getting excited. They're all in a risk aversion place. That's quantitative evidence that deal flow isn't the problem. It's the lens with which you're viewing that deal flow. And one could go back and argue, well, due diligence, yada, 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 but you didn't ask all the questions up front. You picked a subset of questions for this group and a subset of questions for that group. And that influenced how much farther you were going to go in the process with them. We talk a lot about pre-seed in a lot of the groups and things that I'm in. And it's interesting because it is basically it's a time to bet on people, right? Pre-seed isn't the time to go through all the business mechanics. It's not the time to go through cost of customer acquisition. It's not the time to go through how this scales, right? You're not at a scaled place. But what tends to happen is you see a shift in the conversation. So if you're pre-seed, they're asking you Series A questions. If you're Series A, they're asking you Series B questions. And for some reason, not noticing that their mentality and their readiness has shifted and they've become more conservative. So you have to be twice as good to get half as much, which is, and then it comes back to, well, we just don't have a pipeline. It's like, you have a pipeline. You have a beautiful pre-seed pipeline. Treat them as pre-seed. Throw 150K at them. Throw 50K, whatever it might be, and let them run with it. And I think that's a really big challenge that we're having right now of the bar moving. Every time you jump a hurdle, it gets a little bit higher. But we still haven't gotten to a prize yet.
Yeah. And it's like, that is what kind of stifles a lot of our wealth. It's like that goes back to us trying to build these businesses, be in these rooms, become these elite set of founders, and still having to hop through all of these hoops, right? And, some people are building businesses for all types of reasons. Some people need that immediate revenue and funding, and now they can't get it in order to do XYZ within their lives. So now you're you're playing around kind of with the metrics of their wealth and really not letting them to even kind of establish it or even just kind of get to the table where they can get started. And that, folds into all of the issues that we're still dealing with and continue to deal with.
And the flip side to that is our counterparts who aren't running into those challenges are also the ones that are most likely to have enough cushion and enough backing, enough generational wealth. And when we say generational wealth, it's not about being millionaires, but it's about, thousandaire. If your parents own their house and you get in really bad financial trouble, they can put out a HELOC loan and give you some cash. But if you don't have family that owns land, that's a very different thing. I mean, credit, just talking about credit rating. So, okay, if we can't get, independent, like an angel or VC money, can we get a loan? Well, if we historically are being pulled down by our credit scores, systematically, not individuals, but as a group being pulled down by systemic factors that, put us at a disadvantage. I mean, we're not all from the hood, but those of us that are, we know that we had a light bill since we were 9 in our name and in our social security number. That's a very different life.
Yeah.
And so it's a frustration point, but I also think it's a great opportunity as Black founders continue to build and grow companies to have these conversations and have these conversations openly, not just amongst ourselves, but with the broader crowd, because I think the world is watching and listening right now. And this is a great time to have those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that we're having this conversation. That's really why this series was started, to tell our own stories and to really let people know that we do actually care about our wealth. We care about our communities, and we understand, and we can read, right? Like we can do math. Like we can do those.
I got some degrees.
Right. Like
we're around this house. They're sitting in a box, but I got them.
We have all of these marks and these checked boxes. And, we've had that, we've been there, we've done that, we've been doing it since we, got here, basically. And now it's really about educating and pushing everyone else forward with us. And we'll kind of wrap up with a little bit of a quick rapid fire, but I do kind of want to get your thoughts around what do you feel like we can do just as a community of color to really continue to push our power forward from a financial perspective?
Education is going to be the biggest piece. We are living in unprecedented times. It used to be that you had to go get a library card, go sit in a library and dig through books for hours.
Remember that? A library card? Jesus.
I mean, you know what? I will say, quick tip: if it's hot outside, go sit in the library because their AC is always right.
That is very
always right. But I mean, now we live in a time that we don't even have to have laptop computers at home. They're still, fairly expensive, although they're getting less expensive. But most people have some form of smartphone. And so you can literally get on a smartphone and be like, I don't know anything about investing. Let me go find out. And that information is out there for you for free. You don't have to pay anybody to take you through a course to teach you how to be better at budgeting or all of those things. You can do that. And if you have the ability to do so, it helps. It definitely helps to have coaches and to help have programs that walk you through. But if you have wherewithal, and intent, you can go find out how anything works. You can go and say, hey, somebody wrote a contract with me and I don't know if this sounds fishy or not. You don't have to go get a lawyer. You can share it on the internet and just get some basic, they're not legal. If it's not legal advice.
Right. It's like, yeah.
But people can go, wait a minute, that doesn't look right. So you have the capability to utilize the knowledge of millions of people and archives and all of these things. And so for us, I think the biggest thing is rather than for us to go into the world and say, okay, I got this, I'm savvy, always be learning, always building up that education around it. If you run into things that you're not familiar with, don't be afraid to ask, right? And ask for what you want and ask for what you don't know. And as you build that up, the worst thing that could happen is you look stupid. That's really not a painful thing. That does not cost you money.
It sure doesn't.
Dumb.
If anything, you learn something, right? It's like the same thing our parents used to tell us, right? You learned something, didn't you?
You learned, right?
You learned something.
Right? And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think the beauty is also like the internet is, does have a certain amount of anonymity for, so you can go out there and ask dumb questions. Just give yourself a different screen name and get on Reddit and be like, I got some stupid questions. Boom, 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 boom.
Yep.
And let people help you out. I think, there's an arrogance in any time that you go into a situation that you're kind of a fish out of water and you're new to, and you presume that you know what's going on. You don't know what's going on. You may be smart, you may be able to figure things out, but you still need something to start with to begin to build on. And so really building out that education and teaching your kids, like, don't hide. If you're broke or if you have stuff going on in the family, don't worry about stressing your kids out. Talk to them about it. Let them understand that this is the financial situation we're in. This is why we're in it. This is what we're doing to try to fix it. Let's see what happens, right? It's not on you to wake up in the morning and not go to school and go to work instead. That's not what I'm saying. But providing that exposure early, because a lot of things, and I can say this even around relationships, a lot of things that were hidden from us as kids, when we as adults run into it in like relationships and stuff, we're like, this isn't right. This isn't how it was in my house. Oh yeah, it was. Y'all just didn't hear it. Y'all just didn't hear it. So it's really important to be very open about finances. The other thing that I'm very open about is like salaries and things, especially when I was in corporate, because one of the biggest ways any abuser of any type can really keep you in bondage is secrecy and shame. And so in the corporate abuser kind of case where you're not getting paid what you're worth and you're getting jerked around by companies and things like that, having transparency of salary with your peers and understanding what people are making and being able to have those conversations. And I know you're not going to be comfortable with everybody, but if you can be comfortable with other Black and brown people and even get that sense of what's going on, that's really, really powerful, and it gives you negotiating power. So again, it's like that knowledge and just getting as much information as you can and having that transparency and talking about finances and not making it a taboo topic. I mean, the shame piece of, I burnt up that credit card. Now I'm in all this debt. I don't know if there's a difference between, I was listening to Brene Brown, and I won't pontificate too long about this, but she was talking about the difference between guilt and shame. Shame says, I am a bad person. Guilt says I did a bad thing. And you really want to live on the guilt side, right? It's because every time you make a choice, you're actually taking away your own capability, your own agency when you say, I am a bad person, when you make a mistake or when you do something that isn't in line with what you would have wanted to do. So it's like, I did a really dumb thing. I feel stupid for doing a dumb thing. That doesn't make me a stupid person. Doesn't make me a bad person. And I just need to do better the next time. And so having that mentality will open up those conversations. It'll open up those opportunities for education and really allow you to take ownership of your finances. And people get in all kinds of situations. Our illustrious current president, we've seen the financials, right? That man has no shame. No shame at all whatsoever.
With anything.
With anything. And so while I'm not saying go be a despicable person, I am. All walks of life can go bankrupt. All walks of life can spend money on dumb stuff. All walks of life can make investments that they thought were smart and they weren't, or that they just had no control over. Sometimes you just don't have control over. Sometimes your house burns down. Sometimes your investment dries up. Sometimes there is a pandemic and the markets dry up.
Yep.
It's okay. Nothing to be ashamed of. So talk, educate, and be transparent. And I think that that's a great place to start.
Beautiful. I hope everyone caught all of those gems because there were a lot of them. And I love that part about the shame versus the guilt, because I think that is a lot of the issues where we just punish ourselves, right? And punish ourselves in a way that's not productive for us to move forward. So I'm really happy that you mentioned that, and really that you went through all of those things, because they're so key and so vital to our growth personally, professionally, in any other area of our lives. So thank you for dropping those gems. So I'm gonna get into my favorite part before I let you leave out of here. So we'll go through a couple quick little rapid fire questions here. So I always like this one right here. So, what is the one item you regret spending money on?
Ooh, that's good.
This is always a fun one.
Ooh, so
there's always a story.
Well, I mean, there isn't like a big item that I can think of that I was like, that was really dumb. But in general, as a behavior,
Mm-hmm.
and I can even say that I've done this today, spending money on a meal that's not worth it. Like, it just wasn't like, I don't feel satisfied. I actually have indigestion. Not that y'all needed to know that. Like,
listen, we're talking, we're sharing, we're family.
It's like if you're on a diet, right? So I've been on a few diets, right? You do the diet and then you have your cheat day, but you waste your cheat points on like soggy French fries, and they're not salty and they're not crisp, and you're just like, oh, that wasn't worth it. And my dad used to say he would never put meals on credit cards because he said they would go through you before you paid them off. And I was like, that is the most bizarre thing, but it is so
but it is, yeah.
And also with meals, like when you're eating out, and we were talking about this earlier, you get and they just add up so quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, with all of that money I spent, I could have bought lobsters and grilled them and had butter. You know what I mean? If you think about it. And so that's something that I always challenge myself with. And I try to create the rule around, if I can make it myself, then I won't buy it. If I can't make it myself, now I'm not paying for just the food, but I'm paying for the expertise in the making of it, which makes me feel like I purchased a service plus the meal. Mm-hmm. And then if the meal happens to be, turning out worse than I thought it was going to be, you have to give yourself grace and go, I had no way of knowing. I couldn't have controlled for that. I just won't come back next time. I'm not a bad person. I'm not a dumb person for choosing that. It just wasn't what we were hoping.
It just didn't work out.
It just didn't work out.
And move on, right? It's like, okay, I just won't make that again.
Exactly. Or sometimes it's like, well, but the drinks were good, so it kind of nets out.
Sometimes there is some sort of added bonus in there. Generational wealth will do what for your family?
Ooh. Create stability. I think that it's really hard to be daring without underlying stability, right? It's hard to be courageous, without understanding that, knowing where the bottom is and knowing that you can hit that and move forward. Now, sometimes we do put everything on the line. Sometimes we do put our very lives at risk for whatever the things are that we believe in. But I think generational wealth will enable my kids and my kids' kids and so on to incrementally take more chances. And whether that chance is starting a business or whether it's, I think I want to be an artist. I don't want to go to high school. I think that's a beautiful
Which is reality, right?
But that's the thing, the fashion designers of the world that are out there creating these amazing fashion houses. Like, did their dad go, yeah, you should be a fashion designer and like wrap fabric around people? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. The artists, the Van Goghs of the world, like there are beautiful things out there. And I think the notion that we must be doctors, lawyers, postal workers, like very practical roles, is to some extent a very poverty driven mindset. Now, if you're in love with dogs, yeah, be a veterinarian. That's a beautiful thing. But don't be a veterinarian because you like dogs and your parents insist on you being a doctor and you're like, this is the closest thing that I could get to that doesn't drive me nuts. Right? I would love to give my kids and the generations ahead of me the opportunity to make dumb choices, not be dumb people, but make dumb choices and experiment and create a beautiful life without the fear of disappointing me or taking away the legacy of the family.
That's really powerful and really true. It's like the world is changing in such a unique way with the ability to have, little brown kids have freedom, right? The freedom of thought and the freedom to create that, our counterparts have had for years, right? It's like now we're able to gift that as a society. So I think that's incredible. Let's see. I think you kind of touched on this before, but if you could tell communities of color one thing right now, what would it be?
Oh. Continue to hope. Continue, don't let your hope get sucked up into all of the things that are out there that are telling you not to. Continue to hope. I don't think there's anything that we can't get through as a community, so long as we hold on to that. When we start to lose hope, that's where the calamities really come in.
Mm-hmm. That's very true. Hope. Yeah. It's like that's all we can go off for the rest of this year. Orion, thank you so much for coming on. I feel like I'm gonna have to go rewatch this again for myself and take some much needed notes. You provided some wonderful, wonderful gems, and really just some true inspiration, which is, I feel like we really need that right now more so than ever. So thanks a lot for coming on, sharing your story, and really being comfortable about sharing also your personal money journey. So we appreciate it and appreciate you. So always feel free to come back. I feel like we have to unpack some other stuff. I feel like we're going to have to do an episode 2 with you.
I'm totally down with it. Thank you so much for having me and just letting me, share. I think having open conversations like this are really, really important. They're not always comfortable. I'm not always comfortable, but I think it is important to share and to know that, it's going to be okay even when it isn't.
Seriously, like it's like
it's going to be okay. Yeah.
Always a pleasure. Well, thanks for everyone for tuning in to the Included series, and we'll see you next week. Have a good one.